Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody here and thank the City of Westland for having me back to their library and also acknowledge the audience at home. My name is Mariya Fogarasi. I had the good luck to spend 4 years in South Korea, and my talk is about South Korea. We, as US citizens, are not supposed to be in the North. We have no diplomatic representation if anything goes wrong. And sometimes things can go wrong. I don't know if you remember that tragic case of the student Otto Warmbier from the University of Virginia who was on a class trip there, and he took down a poster from the hotel where he was staying and was arrested and came home 2 years later in a coma and died shortly thereafter. So US citizens are strongly discouraged from visiting North Korea. So my talk is about South Korea, the Republic of Korea. And I always talk about the flag at the beginning. This is the flag that you see at the screen. The Koreans call it the Pkwy, or the Supreme Ultimate Flag. And with the white background being the traditional color for Korean garments, and in the middle, the red and the blue, or the yin and the yang, representing the cosmic and the negative forces in the universe. And then the black stripes are called trigrams, and they are representing fundamentals of peace and harmony. So the Pkwy, here we go. And here I am on the screen. This is my hanbok. This is a traditional Korean dress for women. It's not what you would see if you were in everyday Korea right now. Korea is a very modern country, but I was very fortunate to have this made for me. My husband was the reason we went to Korea was my husband was the commercial minister at the US Embassy there for 4 years. We came from Berlin and we returned to Berlin, which made it all the more interesting because we came from a country and city that had been divided to a country that is still divided today. But there was an evening where ambassadors and their spouses were invited to a sort of an event where every country had to present something on the stage. Our ambassador and his wife could not go on that evening, and so I was able to go for them, and then this hanbok, this is called a hanbok, was made for me. Traditionally, it would have been, or very fancy ones would have been made out of silk. This is more of a cotton polyester. It's not a very practical dress. It doesn't have any pockets. It doesn't have a zipper. And you would see it today. Almost every Korean woman has a hanbok in her closet, but basically maybe for weddings or for some kind of a cultural festival, a family festival at home. But anyway, because I was representing the United States that evening, the hanbok was made for me in the colors red, white, and blue. And so Korea, the land of the morning calm, how it got that nickname. I do have to mention that some of my slides are taken from the internet. I could not have taken some of these great shots myself. But first of all, in 1895, there was a British painter working on the peninsula. His name was Henry Savage Landor. And he gave Korea the name Land of the Morning Calm, but he meant it in a critical way because there was a dynasty in Korea, the Chosun dynasty, from 1392 to 1498, 500 years, and it had grown very old, very sluggish, very corrupt. So Henry Savage Landor was saying morning calm in the sense that not very much was happening. But then there was an emperor of the Ming dynasty, the Celestial Empire of the East, and he looked at Korea with its beautiful mountain peaks and its very tranquil waters. The peninsula is 70%, the entire peninsula is 70% mountain, one of the most rugged geographical areas in the world. And so, especially in the morning, there's a very peaceful feeling in these mountainous scenes. The mountains are mostly in the north and in the east, and then they kind of have a plateau down to the southwest where the agriculture is and where there are larger centers of population. And so the land of the morning calm, the nickname stuck for those two reasons. So we are talking about Korea, and we are going to look over here. Way up here, you have North Korea bordering China and just a tiny bit of Russia by Vladivostok. And then here you have South Korea. Here you have Japan. Here you have the Yellow Sea. And this is a contested name. Korea would be would call this the East Sea. Japan calls it the Sea of Japan. Technically, I shouldn't even be using it in this presentation, but it was a good map for me to use. And so this is the peninsula, the half peninsula that I'm talking about right now. So Korea, before the Korean War, which started in 1950, it was one peninsula for over a millennium. No one ever thought it would be divided for any one reason. But as World War II was ending, and we were allies with the Soviet Union, but there were, overtures of the fact that we weren't getting along so well anymore. And so the United States was tasked with coming up with some kind of a solution. Our closest troops at that time were on Okinawa, which is 600 miles away, and there were already Russians on the peninsula. So there were two sergeants, Charles Bonesteel and Dean Rusk. Dean Rusk later became the Secretary of State for John F. Kennedy, and they were tasked for finding some kind of proposal to divide the peninsula, which everybody thought was only going to be temporary, and present this to the Soviets. So they really wanted to follow provincial boundaries, but they didn't have a map, and so they arbitrarily chose the 38th parallel, which is exactly where you see that line. They wanted to make sure that we, the Americans, had the capital of Seoul in our part, right here. And the Russians, to their amazement, said yes, without any discussion, without any questioning. And so this was the first division of the peninsula that everybody, again, thought would be temporary. This is what it would have looked like. You would have had the Cyrillic. This is a picture of a picture in a museum that I took. The Cyrillic would be the Russian side, and then obviously our side, just out in the countryside. And then another picture from the museum, the people there looking at this sign and trying to make some sense of the fact that what was happening in their country at the time. So this is the famous 38th parallel that we still talk about today, even though today's boundary deviates slightly, because at the end of the Korean War, so the Korean War started on June 25th, 1950, when the North invaded the South. The North was aided by Chinese troops, and the war, so they made advancements right away, but then we were able to retake ground. That's the Korean War in a nutshell. And unfortunately, the war dragged on for almost 3 more years, which was very, very sad. We lost 37,000 troops in the Korean War. We had 40,000 wounded, and about 1 million South Koreans lost their lives. In 2018-19, and we have still 7,600 missing in action. When we had 2018-19, we had 2 meetings between the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un and President Trump, who was president then and is again president now. North Korea presented the remains of 55 troops to the United States. But when further meetings between the two were canceled, North Korea said that they weren't really interested in helping us find any more of missing remains. So that's the status. So at the end of the war, there was never a peace treaty signed. There was only an armistice. Technically, the two countries are still at war, and this was the border. There was no peace treaty because the South Korean president would not accept the division of the peninsula, and as time went on, the issue of POWs is always hanging there. So A, no peace treaty, B, only an armistice, and C, the current border, which slopes up, as you can see, ever so slightly to the north on the right-hand side of the peninsula. This is the current status, but everybody still refers to it as the 38th peninsula, 38th parallel. This is for the United States. In Washington, D.C., we have a memorial to different wars. We have a memorial to the Vietnam War. This is a memorial to the Korean War, to the soldiers in these very, very heavy capes fighting the bitter winters. And our nation honors her sons and daughters who answered the call to defend a country that they never knew and to people they had never met. And this is in Washington, D.C. now. So we're talking about, again, Korea. You've got the capital, Seoul, up here. We're going to be looking at Seoul. We're going to look at Incheon, which is where the major airport, international airport, would be if you were to visit. And then we're going to have some outings around Seoul and then go all the way down to the south This ferry sinking is not pertinent to my talk. It just happened to be on the map. Again, you see the controversial name up here, Sea of Japan versus East Sea, and then you go down to Jeju Island in the south. And I'd like to pay tribute to our troops that are on the peninsula now, or the half peninsula. We have about 28,500 American troops, everything, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. This was a very unusual situation. Our family was an embassy family, but all the embassy families except for the ambassador lived on an army post. We lived on this Yongsan army garrison here. I'll be telling you about that. It doesn't exist anymore. The entire army post took about 25 years to move, but it's right down here now. This is an Air Force base, so if you get VIPs or high-ranking dignitaries coming in from the US, they would probably land there, and then they would go to one of the military posts. And you can see the other. For instance, here, up here, Red Cloud is getting up towards the border. That would be a post where the soldier would not be accompanied by his or her family. That would be a solitary one. Whereas Camp Humphreys, which is now the largest US military overseas installation in the entire world, has about 45,000 people living on it. And that would be a post that has schools and movie theaters and everything else that families need to, are we still good here? Yeah, okay. So, by the way, for the United States, Korea is an anchor of stability in the Asia-Pacific region. So these troops are there for military purpose, but also they also will have evacuation exercises for civilians, not only with the United States, but if anything were to go wrong. They had one time they asked at the embassy who wanted to volunteer to go on one of these evacuation exercises to an island off of Japan, but I had 3 small children at home. I couldn't volunteer for that, but I thought that would have been very interesting. But anyway, a salute to our troops. And this is the actual DMZ, the dividing line, but it's not just a border. It's actually a strip of land that is 160 miles wide and then 2.5 miles, so it's a chunk. It's almost like a rectangular chunk going across the peninsula. And the DMZ, people have said that if the two Koreas were ever to unite or even be friendly with each other, that this DMZ should be really a national park, because no one has really been in it since 1953, except, close to the borders there are landmines on either side, but there is flora and fauna that you don't see in other parts of the peninsula anymore. So DMZ stands for Demilitarized Zone, but I will use the initials DMZ. There's a lot that goes on up at the DMZ that we never hear about. First of all, there are 2 villages, one on each side of the DMZ. On the South Korean side, the village is a working village. People live there. They have tax exemptions because they are so close to the border. There is no military compulsory duty like for the rest of the civilian population. But on the north side, if you look more closely at these buildings, you will see they look very attractive. They look like something you wouldn't expect to see in poverty-stricken North Korea. But if you look more closely, you see that they're only shells. There are no people living there. They will have a caretaker crew of men who will sweep the streets to make it look like someone's living there, but it's all a hoax. There's nobody living there. North Koreans would not be allowed to go that close to the DMZ. Then you've got the flagpole war. At some point in time, South Korea put up a flag that was 323 feet tall. This is the North Korean flag. They responded with a flagpole that is 525 feet tall. So they had to outdo each other on that. Then you have tunnel warfare. So starting in the 70s, 4 tunnels have been found being dug underneath the DMZ, and it came through to South Korea with the intent of an invasion into Seoul, into the capital. The first one was discovered because a farmer working in his field just noticed something really, really strange about the land. And when they found these tunnels, North Korea claimed that they were digging for coal, but on closer inspection, there's no coal down there. They have painted the walls to be black. And every tunnel grew a little bit more sophisticated as they went on. It might have sloped in a different way, to help with the runoff of water. And if you take a tour up to the DMZ, you can go part way into one of the tunnels and look at this. So that's the tunnel warfare. Then there's balloon warfare, with both sides sending balloons over with messages to the other side. Also trash warfare with the balloons, where balloons have been sent over from the north to the south full of trash. Then they pop. And then there have been loudspeaker warfare, where they broadcast slogans at each other, trying to get, North Korea will be trying to get the soldiers on the south side to defect, and likewise. So just we don't read about it all the time, but it's out there. They also have, North Korea is very good. They have hacked into the cryptocurrency market, and just when Bitcoin was coming, to be something. And they are also very good counterfeiters. They used to excel at the $100 bill. But when we brought out the new $100 bill with Benjamin Franklin, the big Benjamin, in 2013, that's been a little bit harder for them to counterfeit. But they are very good at that, and they put their talents to that. And then there was a very tragic sinking of a boat that was not in their waters. It was just off the west coast. It was still in South Korean waters, and this happened in March 2010, right before we left Korea. And the ship sank, and there were 46 sailors who lost their lives. Here's the current president of Korea at that time, Lee Myung-bak, with a memorial to the sailors. And after extensive investigation, it was determined that it was a North Korean torpedo that sank. And this is just in 2010. But there's not a whole lot that South Korea can do other than petition the world for more sanctions. So this was a real tragedy. So no love lost. And in fact, in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, relationships have worsened between the two countries. And we go forward from there. So this is up at the DMZ. This is what's called the Peace Village, or Panmunjom. If peace talks were ever to take place, they would be here. This is the one place where South and North Korean soldiers can come face to face. This will also be on your tour. This was also 2018-19. This was a rare moment when it looked like relations were going to warm, with the dictator Kim Jong-un and the then President Moon shaking hands. Again, that goodwill is not really prevalent these days. There they are at a dinner together. So times do change, and it seems to go in waves. This is the tour group that you could be on if you came, up to the DMZ on a tour, and the tour would be led by if you can see the American GI by the door, he's right over here, and then the South Korean soldiers, and you are told, don't try to make friends with them, don't try to shake their hands. They are there to do their duty, and they're not there to chit-chat with you, so don't go near them. They have a job to do. But this is a very popular tour going up from Seoul to the DMZ. And then this is very interesting. We do have U.S. soldiers up at the DMZ, again, unaccompanied tours, not with their families. And they have, for recreation, a one-hole putting course, which they call the world's most dangerous golf course. And as it's warning you here live, do not retrieve balls from the rough. There are live minefields out there. And you can see this. You wouldn't go near this, but on your bus tour, you would see it out of the window when you're up at the DMZ. So, but also, interestingly enough, the DMZ was the answer to Final Jeopardy way back in 2020. So the category was Asian geography. And the question was, this 150 by 2.5 mile area created in 1953 is now home to more than 100 endangered and protected species. And I think 1 out of the 3 on Jeopardy answered correctly. The answer is the Korean Demilitarized Zone. And again, going back to my point that area really has flora and fauna that has not been seen elsewhere on the peninsula. But anyway, that was Final Jeopardy way back then. I was actually giving this talk just after that Final Jeopardy, and somebody in the audience told me about that. I hadn't seen that episode, so I incorporated it into my talk. So, okay, so if you were flying to Korea, you would land at Incheon International Airport, which is on the coast. It's a very fancy airport. The top 5 airports in the world are all in Asia. Number 1 is Changi in Singapore, which apparently has 2 24-hour movie theaters and a swimming pool on the rooftop. And then number 2, you have Doha in Qatar, because Qatar, when they hosted the World Cup games a few years ago, they really beefed up they made their airport look beautiful and welcoming. And then you have 2 in Tokyo, and then you have Incheon. Incheon was, I read for 2025, number 4 in the world. So this is Incheon Airport. And Incheon did not always look like that. This is September 19th, 1950, after the start of the Korean War, where the North had invaded and come down and taken the capital. And this is an operation called Chromite, which was a United States-led. We were assisted by 15 other countries, and there were 261 vessels, and it was led by General Douglas MacArthur. You can see him with his field glasses there, and this was to try and invade from the sea, and they were successful, and that's when we took back the capital and pushed back all the way down to the south. But again, unfortunately, the fighting continued for 3 more years, which was really, really tragic. When we were living on the Army post, the Stars and Stripes, which is the newspaper for the US military, they were telling us that South Korea had recreated the Incheon landing. I don't think they do this every year, but they did it that year on September 19th. I think, A, to thank the 16 countries who helped, and also B, to show the North Koreans that, just a show of force. And I do want to say that after the Korean War ended, the United States put billions of dollars into the country with humanitarian help and military help, and just building it up again as a bulwark in the Pacific there. And again, you have to remember China and North Korea and the 50s and the anti-communism, the fear in the United States, which was all the more reason to really make this part of the peninsula very, very strong. So this is Incheon Airport, the 4th terminal, which opened in time for the Winter Olympics, which the country of Korea hosted in 2010. It seems like a long time ago now, and some ways it seems like yesterday, but very, very pretty airport. So I want to introduce you now to Seoul, Korea, the capital. Seoul has approximately 25 million inhabitants, but if you go outside you look at the outskirts, the entire metropolitan area, it's about 50 million, which is about half of the residents on the entire peninsula. This is the Han River in the middle, and the part closest to me, south of the Han River, in the 1950s and 60s, was only rice fields or mud. It wasn't built up at all. Think about that, the early 60s, and now this is 2026, and this is what it looks like. So it didn't take long for South Korea, with help from other nations, to become a powerhouse. It has 2 nicknames, Seoul, a miracle on the Han, meaning the Han River, or Cinderella story, because that rapid rise from rags to riches. In the early 60s, the average income per capita would have been about $87 US, and now it's roughly 26,000. That would be average in Korea. So big difference there. So this is Seoul, Korea. This is the Army post that we lived on, where I told you it's now been moved because this Army post was in the middle of a capital city, and how could you ever mobilize if you really needed to? So why is that Army post, or why was it even there in the first place? Well, originally when Seoul was very, very small, the Chinese established this post in 1880. And then when Japan annexed Korea in 1910, it became a Japanese Army post. You can still see the cherry trees that the Japanese have planted there. And meanwhile, Seoul was growing and growing. And in 1945, when Japan was defeated and Korea, the peninsula, was handed back to the United States, it became a U.S. Army post. So by this time, it was in the middle of this city of Seoul. And eventually, the U.S. government decided that they had to do something. And so they finally moved it south. But we were really privileged to live on this Army post because, again, it had all the military facilities, the movie theater, the bowling alley, the driving range. So you paid with dollars, you had the military police, you drove 25 miles an hour, and then you went out the gates and you were thrust into this city of 15 million people with 8 lanes of traffic and paying with the Korean won. It was a real, real opposites there. But it was fascinating. This would be one of the gates that we would have come through when we were entering back to the post.
What is it now?
Now it's in limbo. Most of the people in Korea are hoping, or in Seoul, that they keep it partly as a park. There are some developers that have their eye on it, but it would be really nice because in this city of concrete, you need a little bit of greenery. So I'm not sure of the final status. We do still have a hotel there called the Dragon Hill Hotel, which is an R&R destination for U.S. military personnel. But it's much, much smaller than it used to be, that piece of land. So we'll see. Yongsan means Dragon Mountain, so hopefully the fate of Yongsan will go in a good direction for the citizens of Seoul. And this would have been a meet and greet here. This would have been when we were there when Barack Obama was president. Meet and greet would be separate for the military, and then for embassy personnel, it's a show of support for whoever is stationed there, whoever is posted there. And then this is symbolic of the joint cooperation between the Korean military and the U.S. military. We've had 2 joint exercises twice a year, and always a lot of rumblings from North Korea when that happens. But we have currently still a very good cooperation. So we're going to go on a tour of Seoul, and we're going to take the Seoul City tour bus, and it's a hop-on, hop-off bus. These are in many major cities around the world where you buy a 24-hour ticket and you can get on the bus, and there are usually headphones in 12 different languages. And then if you want to hop off somewhere, you can, and your ticket is still valid when you get back on the bus again. And the first place that we're going is to the building that you see behind the bus, and this is National Treasure number 1. This is Namdaemun Gate, or the Great South Gate. So when Japan annexed Korea in 1910, they held the island until 1945. It was a very cruel annexation. They exploited the culture, the language, everything that was produced. What Japan could use went first to Japan, and then Korea got the rest of it. And they made a list. They made a list of national treasures in 1938, as if they were taking inventory of what they had on the peninsula. And a national treasure is a treasure, an artifact, a building, or a site that has historical or cultural or architectural significance. And this beautiful gate was national, and still is, National Treasure number 1. So this gate was one of 8 gates in the old city of Seoul when the Chosun dynasty came into being, so it probably would have been built around 1395 to 1400. And there were 8 gates, but there were 3 very special gates. So this gate is also known as the Gate of Exalted Ceremonies. And you would have had it for control access to the capital city. You would use it to greet foreign emissaries or dignitaries. And at that time, you would have kept Siberian tigers out. But of course, there are no more Siberian tigers. So the wall around the city of Seoul was 11 miles long and 20 feet high. And this would have been one of the gates. When eventually, as Seoul became more modern, the walls were taken down. And then after the Japanese annexed Korea and the Japanese prince or emperor came to visit, they took down the rest of the walls. They said that he was he could not walk through this gate. It would not be appropriate for him, so it was a slap in the face for the Korean people. But so this gate is absolutely gorgeous. It's the pagoda style, and it was the oldest wooden building in the city of Seoul, and it's splat right in the middle. You can see all the traffic going around it on both sides and all those lanes of traffic. When a friend of mine taught me how to drive, she said, always stay in the middle, and then you won't get shot off to the right or left by mistake. But anyway, here's one more daytime picture of it. This is an old picture of it. This would have been before the Korean War. The U.S. Navy probably made a stop, and the sailors had R&R and came into the city. But look at the modes of transportation here. I mean, you don't see any cars there, do you? You see bicycles, and you see an ox or a cow pulling the cart. So this is really still Korea in the 1950s. And then in 2008, this also happened when we were living there. There was a tragedy. There was someone who was disgruntled. They did find out who he was. Apparently he had to sell some land and was unhappy with the exchange, and he went in there with his lighter fluid. And we read about North and South Korean rockets and everything like that, but South Korea is really a very safe country. Seoul is a very safe city. Whoever would have imagined that you would need to guard this monument, this beautiful treasure? But he set fire. They came and extinguished it. They thought they had put it out, and the fire started again in the night. So this was a horrible, horrible disaster. It has since then been rebuilt, but again, it was a tragedy. It's back to looking its beautiful self again. So this is gate number 1, Namdaemun Gate. Right next to this gate is a market that would have started also back in the 1400s. Citizens probably brought tributes to the emperor. They would have brought grain, or they would have brought rice. And then the market started up with fish and different commodities, maybe cloth. And now it's one of those bustling Asian markets that seems like it never ever goes to sleep. I think it stops at 11 at night and starts up again at 4 in the morning. And it just, a pedestrian zone, and just so many, these are wallets and hats and shoes, and you wonder who ever buys all of this merchandise to keep all of these shops going. But it's very entertaining to walk through Namdaemun Market. And then we'll talk about the masks a little bit later on. This is a souvenir store. And then, of course, you've got the food, endless varieties of food, some of them looking marginally the same, so you're not even really sure what the difference is. But that's part of the fun of traveling in a foreign country, right? To try things, even if you might be a little bit hesitant at the time. So these are the food stalls. So that's the market. This is next to the market. This is a boulevard, and what I'm leading up to is there's a palace. There's a palace right up here, and I'm looking at the gate of the palace here. The gate, the entrance, called Gwanghwamun, going back again to the beginning of the Chosen dynasty. May the light of enlightenment blanket the world. Gwanghwamun Gate. This gate would have been the entrance to the palace, but it suffered a terrible fate under Japanese occupation. They took it down, and they built the Governor General's building. So Japan, the name for Seoul was Kaito. So this is where the Governor General for Kaito would have lived. Well, things went on. This is actually where in 1945 the United States accepted the defeat of Japan, and then it was used for a presidential inauguration and other purposes. But eventually Korea had a debate over whether this building should still be there, because what they had done was take down the palace behind it to put this up. And some people said, oh, we're a modern country now, we're past that, we don't really care. But others said, no, it's wrong that we have this symbol of colonialism. And so this building was taken down, and Gwanghwamun was rebuilt. So it's back there in all of its former glory. And but for instance, there's another building where you see the building right behind there, behind the fountain, which is City Hall. That was built by the Japanese, but it was not felt that was an affront to the Koreans or blocking anything. And so they let that one keep standing. This is the entrance to the palace, Gwangbokgung. And Gwangbokgung is one of about 5 palaces in the city of Seoul. But before that, I want you to look at the mountain behind it. This mountain is, here, I'll go back for one. So that mountain is Bugaksan, and that mountain in 1983, that whole area here, and you can see these people doing something I would never do. They're in the national park and they're rock climbing. It became the 15th national park for Korea in 1983. It's half within the city of Seoul boundaries and half outside. And because of that, because these people are so starved for nature, it gets about 5 million visitors a year. It's one of the most visited national parks in any country, anywhere. And it's gotten to the point where they do have to control access on some days. But it's a beautiful park. Korea has that same flaming red foliage that we do in North America in the autumn. And it's very, very picturesque. So you go hiking in here, and again, you go bird watching. I read that there's the great spotted woodpecker, which is very popular to be seen. So you can imagine living in that city, how this would be a release and a getaway. So that's Bugaksan National Park. And here you can see some of the hikers there. So going back to the palace, Gwangbokgung means a palace blessed by miracles of heaven, but the palace has had a lot of problems since it was first built at the beginning of the Chosen dynasty. It, 200 years after it was built, it was burned completely by the Japanese in about 1592. It lay in ashes for 300 years. Then it was rebuilt, and this is what it looks like at night. It's very beautiful, it's very illuminated. But then again, like I said, when Japan colonized the peninsula, they took down all the buildings except for just a couple of them on the pretext that they were going to hold an exhibition there, which they never did. So they built it all up again, and you can visit it. And this would be one of the more tranquil parts there, and looking at the garden. And then this would have been the room where the emperor sat. The floor is wooden, and it's up off of the ground because there would have been some method of heating underneath that floor. And I thought, oh, I heard palace, and we came from Europe, and I thought, oh, we'll go into this building and see all these rooms with velvet chairs and this and that and paintings. So this is a completely different kind of palace. It's just as interesting. It's a different style, different culture. This is really something great. After we left, the Korean government decided to combine tourism with history and culture. So you can now rent a hanbok, just like I'm wearing, and then you get free admission to the palace grounds. So this is a great program. People love it. They love dressing up, men and women alike. This is, for instance, this is a hanbok rental where they're telling you how much it costs, and they can do their hair service, underskirt. You get the locker for free for your street clothes. So this is just a brilliant idea. And so you can go on any given day and see people walking around in hanbok. And here you've got some tired-looking tourists at the end of the day. And this is very close to the palace. This is an area, one of the few areas in Seoul where you can still see the traditional style housing, because as in many cities, historic preservation was not at the forefront of the mind, and most of them were taken down. This would have been an area where the nobility or the very learned people, the scholars, would have lived. It's called Bukchon Village. It's about 600 years old, but it's very, very pretty. You can see the streets. It's very attractive. And again, they have the same cultural tourism going there with the rental. And you can here see also the man's costume as well as the women's costume. Bukchon Village has people who really live in it. They're residential, and beautiful, beautiful wooden doors. And so there is a problem. They're asking you to please respect the fact that people live here and to speak in whispers. Of course, it's really hard to get people who are excited about being somewhere pretty to speak in whispers. But they've also done a fair amount of filming for television shows in the Bukchon Village. So this is also right in the middle of Seoul. This is a tribute to King Sejong, who was, you can see his lifespan up there. He was a very benevolent king. He promoted Confucian principles, scientific technology, and advancements. But what he's most known for is the invention or creation of the Korean alphabet. The Koreans are very proud of their alphabet, which is known as Hangul. He took 28 shapes, and you can combine them in different ways to get the letters. Up until then, the Chinese alphabet had been used, and he wanted the common person to make it more easy because the Chinese alphabet is quite complex. So he wanted the commoners to be able to use this alphabet. Interestingly enough, his advisors were not at all happy about this. They, the upper echelon, they wanted the power that came with being able to read and write, but eventually it did filter down and go through the whole population. So this beautiful statue was erected during the time that we were living there with the Bugaksan in the background, and this is the fall foliage. And this is a depiction of what we think they would have dressed like back then. This would have been King Sejong with his advisors. They now have a complete museum dedicated solely to the Hangul, to the language, that they opened somewhere between 2010 and 2020. And they also made Hangul Day, which is October 9th, a national holiday. And North Korea also has a Hangul Day, but I'm not exactly sure when theirs is. So anyway, they're very, very proud of their language. This is another national hero. He's a naval hero. Many people compared him to Captain Horatio Nelson. He never ever lost a war. His name is Yi Sun-si, and he would study the tides and take inventories. So most of the wars would, of course, be against Japan. When he died in 1592 at the Battle of Norjang, he is said to have said, do not announce my death. The battle is at its height, and he didn't want anybody to know. But his most famous achievement, and what he's very remembered for and beloved for, is the turtle ship, which you saw here at his feet right here. And this is a turtle ship because you have to remember that the warfare would have been mostly bow and arrow. So the turtle ship with its shell protected the sailors and the warriors. And he went down in history for that. This happens to be a turtle ship in a museum. But Yi Sun-sin is revered for this idea that he came up with. Here he is on a wand note with a picture of the turtle ship depicted there. And this is a depiction of him. He would be conferring with his advisors during a naval battle. So two historical, very revered Korean men. There he is also in the middle of Seoul. And then we go up to a mountain that's also right in the middle of Seoul. This is not Bugaksan, this is Namsan. It's really a much smaller mountain. In 1971, they built a radio television station at the top of it. It's also very popular for hiking. Koreans, and they illuminate it at night, different colors. It looks very pretty. It's just about the #1 tourist attraction in Seoul now for various reasons, which you'll see. First of all, it's great for hiking. You can see how close it is to the middle of the city. This is, these are wooden boards. You'll see exercise sites on the way up, and these are wooden boards telling you exactly, the idea that certain parts of the pads of your feet correspond with certain parts of your body, and explaining all of this to you. They have locks of love on the Namsan Tower, and they have a teddy bear museum up there. So here the teddy bears are dressed up in the traditional clothing of the Chosen Dynasty, and here they are at a tea ceremony. And the traditional formal tea ceremony in Korea is very, very exact. So that's somewhere else you could go on the tour. You could go to the Korean Folk Village, which is just on the outskirts of the city, a little bit like the Henry Ford Museum, or Williamsburg, where you would see the older buildings, the cultural buildings. Some of the things you would see are these jangsung, which are wooden totem poles, which would be put up at the entrances to the villages, big ears, so they could hear the pleas of the villagers, praying for a good harvest, maybe praying for a good marriage, praying for the healthy birth of a baby. These would be the jangsung. You can watch a traditional wedding ceremony. So those would be different kinds of attractions in the folk village there. And this is the Blue House. This is not a tourist attraction. This is where the president of Korea lives. And you've got the beautiful Bugaksan Mountain in the background. So this is his official residence. This would be the soldiers dressing up to greet someone who is coming to visit another president, perhaps, and very, very ceremonial, of course. And this is the Blue House in January of 1968. This was an attack. It turned out that, again, you've got to remember 68, that DMZ is not quite as fortified as it is today, and people had spotted some woodcutters, but nobody suspected that they were really North Korean soldiers, but they were coming in through to attack the Blue House. Their attack was unsuccessful, but the president at the time, Park Chung-hee, he was later on assassinated. They did not succeed, but he was so he came into power through a coup in 1961, and after this attack, he used the attack as an excuse to clamp down on civil liberties with the population. And then he declared martial law in the early 70s, so Korea was under martial law for quite a while. And he was assassinated by someone who was ostensibly his friend, the head of the Korean CIA, in a safe house in Seoul in 1979. Park Chung-hee has a very divided legacy. Many people credit him with bringing Seoul and Korea into the modern age with the economy and the industry, but he's harshly criticized for the civil liberties that he took from his population. and martial law and what they went through. He, in 2014, had his museum and his library opened in the city of Seoul. Consequently, that was either 2012 or 2014. And in 2013, his daughter decided to run on the coattails of her father, and she ran and became president of South Korea. But unfortunately, she was impeached in some kind of a bribery scam or influence peddling, and she landed in prison and was given a lengthy sentence, but she was pardoned in 2021. But she's not active in politics anymore. The current president is this gentleman. So I should tell you that, and maybe you've noticed the way I've been talking, in Korean language, the last name always comes first. So Park Chung-hee would be Chi-hung Park Chung-hee, Chung-hee Park. And just for the record, this is the current president. He survived an assassination attempt before he became president. He has a whole slew of challenges on his plate, but what president doesn't? So this is our current leader for South Korea. So you might want to visit South Korea in the springtime because the cherry blossoms are so beautiful. They start in the south of the island, and of course they spread north as it gets warmer. And everybody, it doesn't matter whether you live there or you're a tourist or what, is out just to enjoy these beautiful sights. I thought this was really cute, this couple with their umbrellas and the white blossoms. And then this is some kind of artistic installation that was installed where people are walking on either side of it and looking down on these little umbrellas. You might want to visit when you have Buddha's birthday parade. I had looked up the date. It changes. It's always either in May or June. It's the oldest and one of the largest parades in the world of its kind for Buddha's birthday. So if you look at at statistics for religion in Korea, ever so roughly 54% of Koreans will say they don't practice a religion. And of the remaining percentage, you got about 20% who are Protestant, 15% Buddhist, and 8% Catholic. Korea already was well established, meaning the missionaries had done their job coming into the 20th century. At the end of the Korean War, about 1 million Korean Christians fled from the north to the south before that border closed. But everybody loves this parade. It's though you've got the lanterns, and then you've got the lotus flower, the symbol of Buddhism. The lotus flower is growing in the water and not in the mud, so it gives us all the ability to become enlightened and the whole philosophy of the Buddhist religion. But this is the ceremony. These are the parade goers. You can make your own lantern, and it's very, very popular. This would be a sound and light show in the city of Seoul, and then you have some festivals. This is the Garden of the Morning Calm, somewhere just outside of the city. This is not for everybody, but this is a mud festival where if you're really in the mood, the Boryung Mud Festival, mostly probably younger people there. And then they have this is a beautiful butterfly festival, and they have a tomato festival where they also get down and get all full of tomato. But obviously those are held at the warmer times of year. So just some things there that you might be there for, might choose, may or may not to watch. Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming all of those festivals are during the spring, summer, or is it only summer?
Well, these would definitely be warm weather festivals, as the butterfly also. Yeah, that probably wouldn't be in the winter. But they are a very four-season country and have a lot of winter activities. But I can't think right offhand of one of those festivals being in the wintertime. So this would have been a rice cultural festival from a page from a magazine on the Army Post. The Army Post has an organization which is always trying to get the military families to go off the post, and of course it's easier to go in an organized tour. This is a mask festival. So traditionally the mask was revered in Korean society. It was symbolic of the gods. It was also kept a certain distance away from your home, but at the same time, it was a means by which to pray to the gods for anything that was good for the village. And so these different masks are created. They look a little bit bizarre. The noses are stumpy and the eyes have the swooping eyebrows. And this would have been at the festival. I'm assuming that tourists might have made these. But the masks themselves always had symbolic, depending on whether the person was old or young or aggressive or foolish or reckless or male or female, the masks would have a certain color. And so it was one way for the people, if they wanted to put on a show or a petition or a criticism of the Yongban, of the higher class, they could do this in an anonymous way because no one would know who they were behind that mask. And here's another example right there. And then we come to the food, and we do have Korean restaurants around here, mostly in northern Detroit or in Ann Arbor with the student body. There are always a million smaller plates on the table that are supposed to be good for you and probably are good for you. And this is my mother when she came to visit, trying to decide what she should try next. And this was one of my favorite activities. This was a program called Hello Friends that was sponsored through the American Women's Club, where you could go take an outing from Seoul for the day, and you would go to an elementary school somewhere on the peninsula, and we would speak English with the children, grades 1 through 5. So in grade 5, they probably had knowledge by then of some sentences. And grade 1, you would be the head, shoulders, knees, and toes. You would be at that level, but it was always a lot of fun. And then afterwards, our interpreter would always take us out to lunch. So here we are, sitting on the floor, and with all these dishes in front of us, wondering what we should try, and it was always an adventure. Some of the dishes that we would know in the United States are kimchi, which is an acquired taste. This is the fermented cabbage, which this is their way of getting vitamin C all winter long. And I went to 2 kimchi making, we had invitations, and we went, and it's the oblong Chinese cabbage. And then there's the red pepper paste, and depending where you are on the peninsula, if you're close to the sea, you might have little bits of seafood in that red pepper paste, or if you're in an area that grows a lot of garlic, you might have more garlic. And then you were supposed to hold the cabbage as if you were swaddling a baby. Hold the cabbage and then, just gently wrap the leaves around the cabbage. And if you order here in a Korean restaurant, you'll probably get a little dish of it. But it is very rich in vitamin C, and traditionally they would bury it in these kimchi jars down in the earth to keep through the winter. Most modern Koreans now have 2 refrigerators. They'll have one just for kimchi because it's such a strong smell, and a regular one. But many women, modern women, don't really want to make kimchi anymore. They prefer to buy it in the supermarket. But it's still an everyday staple. So the next one is japchae. This is very popular with people who don't know the cuisine because it's basically the glass noodles with a lot of vegetables and sesame seeds. And bibimbap. Bap means rice, and bibim means to stir. So traditionally in a bowl that should be served piping hot so that egg cooks as you mix it in with the vegetables and the rice. And you can elect to have it with meat or without meat, and then put in as much red pepper paste as you wish. This is the Korean pancake with the long green onions in it. Duboki is a very popular street food, the spicy rice cakes. And kimbap, again, bap meaning the rice, and kim meaning seaweed. So, an American child might have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in his or her lunchbox. A Korean child would probably have a roll of kimbap that's been sliced up in their lunchbox, so to speak. And then bulgogi, meaning fire meat, the very popular Korean barbecue that some of us might already know. And this one I added to the talk after I saw the movie Parasite, which to the joy of the entire country won the Oscar nomination in 2019. Parasite, it's a kind of a gritty movie about the drastic differences between the educated, the higher society in Korea and the lower society. But in the movie, most, if Koreans weren't wealthy, they would just be having the noodles for dinner. But in the movie, the wife, the very wealthy wife, she sends the maid out to buy some beef, a high quality beef, to mix in with the noodles. And so for a while, this dish was very popular in some of the Korean restaurants as a tribute to the movie. And So, and then again, the endless choice of food at the markets. And here I am with my daughter, very young at that time. We're trying to decide if we're going to try any of it. And this is something I never tried, but this came into being in the early 50s and 60s. This is a silkworm. Korea does have silkworms. They do have a silk industry. And this is the pupa of the silkworm, and it's very rich in protein. So if you're a very poor country, you might want to have this around for your citizens. And now it's a snack. You can get it in little Dixie cups if you go to the circus or out in the park or hiking on the mountain. And you can, I just never tried it, which I shouldn't admit to during this talk. Yeah, well, I've heard that they crunch, but I'm sure. But anyway, the point is they're very rich in protein. So this is the food. So, and then you've got the fisheries. You've got a peninsula, right? Obviously, it's bountiful in creatures of the sea. And you can go to the fish market, and this is just fascinating. They have an auction every morning at 4 o'clock from the fresh catch of the day that's come in. But stall after stall with just everything you could possibly imagine. You can go upstairs and get a pair of rubber boots because it does tend to be a little bit wet on the floor. And you can also look at just it goes on forever. These would be dried fish being used for some ceremony with the yellow ribbon. But this is the squid. The squid is served. It can be served live. And on one of my Hello Friends trips, when we went to a restaurant, we each had tiny little octopus. He was about this big, put in front of us. And there's a bit of a cultural gap there when the interpreter, she couldn't understand why none of the American women wanted to put this octopus in their mouths. So that was, but again, every nation, I want to stress, has its different kinds of foods. And this is frequently now, here, this little guy is being steamed, and it looks like he's hanging to the top of the pan for dear life. It is very common now to put sesame seeds and sesame seed oil because you don't want the tentacles to stick in your throat. And but you don't have to order this. There's plenty of choice, and I don't think the restaurants around here are going to have that on the menu. So, and this is our daughter. It was a dinner where you really couldn't say no to the hosts, and she's got this like half-inch of tentacle that she decided to try. Okay, and this is one of my Hello Friends classes. The little children love to have their picture taken, and they love to practice saying hello. And even if that's the only word that they've learned so far, they love to say hello. And that was a very nice cultural bridge that we enjoyed very much, the ladies of the American Women's Club, while we were there. So this is just for a minute looking at business. I'm sure that you recognize some of these names here on the screen. They are the Chaebol families. So these are family-controlled firms, and they have strong ties with government agencies, and they came into being during the time that Park Chung-hee, the dictator, was in power. Again, giving him credit for, beefing up the economy, bringing Korea into the modern age. But he had some negative sides to this. He modeled it after a system in Japan called Zaibatsu. But in Zaibatsu, in Japan, they were free companies with independent bank ties. And Park Chung-hee nationalized all the banks so he could control how much money each of these companies got when he wanted to give it to them so they could grow artificially large and not be healthy in theory. That has all changed now. The banks are not nationalized anymore, and these companies, as you well know, are still in existence. Just to set, Korea's done very well with energy. It doesn't really have much energy on its own. It's the second largest importer of natural gas in the world. The electricity generation comes from thermal or nuclear, and the coal is not sufficient. So the government is really trying to promote wind, solar, and tidal. And you can imagine wind and tidal on a peninsula that you might be able to get somewhere, emphasizing that kind of energy source. We are a very important market for Korea, and they for us, surprisingly enough, because they're really not a very big country at all, but these are some of the statistics. Korea is our 7th largest export market, and then agriculture, high tech, tourism, 5th largest source of tourism income from this peninsula, and then the exports that so we have a very strong business relationship. When we moved there, the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement was being negotiated and went into effect. It was signed in 2012, and it's still in effect. There have been some waves recently because of, we all know about tariffs, but basically we have a very strong business relationship with South Korea. So we're going to go outside of the city of Seoul now. We're going to go to a tea plantation called Bosung, where you can just look out, and that is a sight for sore eyes coming from Seoul. Just those leaves. You can see a movie about how they're harvested. You can see watch a traditional tea ceremony. I had mentioned when we looked at those teddy bears that the tea ceremony is very exact, how the teapot is held, how the tea is poured, and here you see the women wearing the hanbok. We can go to a bamboo garden, which is a tourist attraction, and take a walk among the bamboo. They have bamboo ice cream. So bamboo, for this, again, this very poor country in the 50s and 60s, there are certain seeds of certain bamboo species that can be eaten as grain. Some of the leaves can be used as fodder for animals. Certain species you can make a pulp, and you can make paper from the bamboo, but really the most important utility is in the stalks themselves, which would be used for constructing simple huts, for fishing poles, and an endless variety of uses for that. So bamboo are very important for the country, and now obviously still there, but just also a beautiful site to visit outside of the city of Seoul. Soraksan is a national park on the east side. We went camping here twice with our son, the Boy Scout troop, and we really, really enjoyed that. Another beautiful venue. And then something very interesting on the East Coast that you wouldn't expect to find, because Korea generally tends to promote its own national self. But there's a museum, and somebody has collected everything they could possibly think of to do with Thomas Edison, which you wouldn't expect to find it there. So that was very interesting to visit. They also have some gramophones there, and so that's over on the East Coast. And this is a family celebration for Lunar New Year, which was yesterday. If any of you followed that, we have galloped into the Year of the Horse. There are the, I was going to say, this is one time where you don't want to leave town because everybody is going to visit their relatives, and this is what the Korean highways would look during Lunar New Year. But I was going to give this as an example of a family celebration where maybe people might still dress up in the old-fashioned clothing here. This shows the dog, but we've entered the Year of the Horse just like our zodiacs. Our zodiac has 12 symbols. They also have 12 symbols, and every time they enter a new year, they talk about all the positive attributes of that particular animal. So, and I know the U.S. Postal Service issues a stamp every year introducing, the animal, the rat, the snake, the ox, the monkey. And so if I go to the post office tomorrow, I should theoretically find stamps for the Year of the Horse. It's a lunar calendar, by the way, so it changes every year. And here you have an example where you can look up the year where you were born, and it's great fun and all of that. So this is where the 2010 Winter Olympics were held. So this is very interesting because the name of the town is Pyeongchang. It was already an established winter resort when Korea won the rights to hold the Winter Olympics there. And the joke at the time was the capital of North Korea is Pyongyang, and this is Pyeongchang. So some people said, well, who would know the difference? Well, obviously there's a huge difference. And when they negotiated or when they made their pitch to hold these Olympics, they had, I don't know if you remember way back in the old days of East Germany, they have an ice skating queen whose name was Katharina Witt, but she was the emblem for the North Korea. But South Korea had an ice skating queen in 2010 named Kim Yoona, who took home about 8 gold medals. And anyway, this was her site. So Pyeongchang, there's the Olympic stadium that they built, and ever energy conscious. They didn't even put a roof on it. And so the athletes and the visiting dignitaries, you could see, they were the breath coming out there. But it was a very clever idea because they saved on costs. And we've read every time we have a set of Olympic Games now, we read about the cost. But in this sense, Korea is very fortunate because it was an existing location and it will continue to serve as such. So there it was. Oh, it was 2018. I'm sorry, Pyeongchang, 2018 right there. These are Buddhist temples out in the countryside. The country, again, so I don't know if I told you, but it's 70% mountainous, so the Buddhist temples are always up in the mountains, but they are open to the public. You can come and just take a look. The temples are open air, and you can wander around. And when Korea hosted the World Cup Games together with Japan, I think it was in 2002, somebody had the idea to, again, combine culture with sport. And they thought, why don't we open up these temples and have a temple stay program? So they said, you can come and spend a night in a temple and see what the monks do and see how they get up and how they pray and how you get a bowl of rice and you learn how to be grateful for every single grain. So this first year that they tried this idea, they had about 10,000 Koreans and 1,000 foreigners, and it was a huge success. And so now it's a big tourism program. You probably sign up online, I would imagine, but you can go to one of these temples and you can stay overnight. And it's, needless to say, very, very peaceful setting. There it is, the open air temple that you can walk into. And so that would be the temple stay program. And now I'm way down on the South Shore in a town called Namhae. And this town, for some reason, looks like it has houses that could be in Europe or Germany. And this is indeed the German village in Namhae. And this is because in the 60s, Germany, the Marshall Plan, Germany's economic engine was kicking in, and they have north of, going up the Rhine River, they have the coal producing area, and they needed coal miners. They didn't have enough. So they actually Germany's relationship with Korea goes way back to the 1880s and lasted all the way through the Japanese occupation. So they have a very strong relationship. Korean law is based upon German law. So in the early 60s, West Germany brought about 8,000 coal miners to Germany over a span of about 14 years. And the West German government paid the country of Korea for their work. And there were some women who went and worked as nurses also. So this was a huge source of income for this, again, this country that was trying to get back up on its feet. And it helped pave the way for Korea to become very modern. So this is also a tourist draw. Obviously, most of the people who went over in the early 60s to work might not be around anymore, but people do drive around. And this is a picture. This is kind of cute. The Korean women wearing the dirndl, which is really just in Bavaria, but some people think it's all of Germany. But maybe they're celebrating an Oktoberfest or something like that. So this is the town of Namhae. And then this would be the second largest city, Busan. Sometimes you see it spelled with a B as in boy or a P as in Paul, Busan, big powerhouse on the ocean. And then last of all, I wanted to go down here to Jeju Island, which is known as the Hawaii of Korea. Before Korea, now a lot of Korean couples have the money to take their honeymoon somewhere else in the world. But Jeju Island has long been a very traditional Hawaii type destination. It tends to have a more tropical climate. And one thing it's very well known for, well, here it is looking down on a scene, but these are the diving women, or the Hanyo. So back when the king wanted to have tributes of abalone from the sea, and after he brought all the men into his armies, so the women had to start to do the diving, they did that, and they became very famous for this. And so they go down there, and they can hold their breath for up to 2 minutes. This has been scientifically studied, and they bring up all the riches of the sea. Unfortunately, the Hanyo are dying out. Not many young women care to pursue this profession anymore, but there is a museum on Jeju Island that is a tribute to them and that tells all about them. So I think we're just about the end. This is me, just in case I hadn't worn the handbook this evening. But so this is my talk about the country of Korea, and I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them. So, yes.
Have you had any Korean spots in Michigan?
Have I had any?
Oh. Have you had any good Korean spots in Michigan?
You mean as far as restaurants? Well, I know there's a big one in Southfield, and I don't know the exact names, but Southfield, Novi, that area, and then in downtown Ann Arbor, you're going to find good Korean restaurants. I just don't know the names, but it's worth visiting one if you've never done it before. Have you ever been to a Korean restaurant?
I've been to a K-pop. So it was
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, K-pop is another huge Korean export, the music that I don't mention in my talk, but yeah, that's true. But try a restaurant. Yeah, you'd like it. You see if you like it. Yeah.
I had Korean fried chicken too. That was pretty good. I like how they fry their chicken.
Yes. There is a fast food place in Troy called Bonchon. Okay, so we really like Bonchon. I was telling the director of economic development where I live in Dearborn, I said, can't you get a Bonchon down here? He said, I'm working on it. We have Paris Baguette. Do you know Paris Baguette? It's a coffee pastry place, and nobody knows at all that they're Korean, but they are Korean. But we're still working on the other one, so, yeah.
How does that chicken compare to, like Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever?
Oh, we'll have to ask the expert. How does the Korean fried chicken compare with Kentucky Fried Chicken?
It's more sauce heavy, I guess. So it doesn't rely on seasonings. It's more of a sauce. And then also the batter is more light in terms of like, you know how KFC has that crunch. I can't really explain it. Can you explain it? I feel like it's more of a lighter batter.
It is lighter.
Yeah.
It is lighter. I agree. Yes. Yeah. You'll have to try it.
I love fried chicken. I know it's that good for me, but I was just curious.
Every once in a while, I think it's okay.
I'm thinking of maybe like tempura. It's got really light batter. Is it kind of
Yes.
like tempura?
Yes.
Because that's a real light batter.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. It's always interesting to see what kind of questions come up after my talks, so I like this one. So anybody else have any question or comment? Or
Did you feel safe when you were there?
we always felt safe. I had said previously, again, that we hear about the rockets and we hear about North Korea, but Seoul, Korea is a very safe country, and Seoul is a very safe city. And we had two children in high school, and we never, ever had any qualms about them going out in the city. And it's got a great subway system, and no, we never felt threatened or in danger at all.
And what kind of schools? What kind of schools did your children go to? Did they go to an English school there, or
They did.
Okay.
They did. They went to an international school. Yes. Actually, there was a school on the Army post they could have attended, and then there was another one, Seoul Foreign School, which was founded. Actually, it was founded by missionaries. It's the same company, the Underwood Typewriter Company, who had come to Korea at some point. And so it had a Christian philosophy, but it was a very good school. It gave the International Baccalaureate degree when you finish high school. And so two of our children graduated there from that school. But it was completely American as far as the curriculum goes.
Since your children were exposed to so much international exposure at the time, are they working in anything internationally, connected, or are they pretty much just working?
One is a professor of literature in Copenhagen, in Denmark, and one is in medical school in Budapest, Hungary, and one's in San Francisco. So yeah, there is always that love of travel, I think, if you've grown up with that kind of life. And yeah, it gets under your skin. Yeah.
You miss them.
I do, but compared to when I went to Germany in 1979 to work, I couldn't call home. I mean, it was way too expensive. You just wrote letters all the time. Of course, the good part about that is I have letters to look back at, right? Nowadays, we don't have any letters to look back at because it's a text or an email. But we have a family WhatsApp circle, and literally it's almost like everybody is right there. Not quite the same, but almost. So the distances in the world, I think, have shrunk with modern technology.
You feel like they're so far away.
Right, exactly. Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Kana, going back to you. Do you want me to hold the mic or?
I'm not
okay,
sure
for sure.
it's
I'm
on,
sorry
is
about
it?
that.
Oh.
Going back to you saying that their subway system is pretty good. Can you go to each of the destinations that you mentioned on your presentation? Just
The
relying
ones
on
that I
public.
pointed out here?
Yeah, relying on public transit, or do you have to have a rental or learn how to drive?
So within Seoul, I had mentioned the Seoul City tour bus that takes you to some of the places, right? Which is a great recommendation for a tourist if you don't want to rent a car. And even if you're just there for a few days, it gives you a good overview. And usually you would travel by bus to, if you didn't own a car, you could get to the tea plantation or the bamboo garden by a bus. You could get all over the country by a bus, sometimes by a train. So the public network is very good. And sometimes it's even faster because I showed you that traffic jam for Lunar New Year. But honestly, that could be on any given weekend trying to get out of Seoul. It's just the traffic is very, very dense, very dense.
Do you want to mention the subways?
And the subway system, yes, I don't know if within the city is superb, the subway city. So very easy to get around with that too. This is my husband, by the way, if I don't know if my assistant this evening. The reason why I was in Korea. Yeah. But,
Thank you for being here. This was super interesting.
well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, and it was just right timing with Lunar New Year. So yeah.
What other countries have you been visiting? What other countries have you been visiting?
So Germany, for various reasons, I've spent 29 years in Germany, and just as a child, and then working, and then my husband had some embassy tours there. Then we were posted to Sofia, Bulgaria, Budapest, Hungary, and twice in Berlin, adding up 10 years in Berlin. And so we're really Central Europe people, that area of expertise. So Seoul, Korea was really very different because we met the US Army and Korea and Asia at the same time. That was very fascinating time for us. You know, I don't think I have a favorite. People ask me that. I mean, in Germany, I can do everything because I'm fluent, I know the country, I know the system. But every one of them, I don't know how to say if I have something special in everyone. Yes. And Toronto, I forgot, and I apologize for mentioning Toronto. That was the first place where John was assigned after we were married. So where I went and I thought, oh, no one's going to know I'm a foreigner now, because in Europe they would hear my accent. And of course, the Canadians knew right away that I was American because we do have different accents. But yeah, something special in everyone. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you again for coming through the fog and making your way to the Westland Library, and just for listening to my story. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.